Hi everyone, I'm Micah Bellieu, CEO and founder of Fluency Corp, Corporate Language Training. And today's video goes along with our blog, The Levels of Language Proficiency, Finally Explained. At the beginning of any language course, a common first question from the student is, what is my current level? Since I've been teaching and assessing students for the past years, I can quickly know a student's language level within 5 to 10 minutes of speaking with him or her. But many times the student or their bosses want an official test to see where they are so that they can take the test again after the course. While it is completely understandable that a corporation paying for its employees' English lessons wants to know the level before and after a course, it is unlikely that they will see a difference on some of the more popular tests, especially if the student hasn't prepared specifically for that test. To get from one language level to the next, it typically takes about 250 conversational working hours or more. And most corporations typically buy 50 to 100 hours for their employees, therefore not allowing for a growth in that time. There is growth, but not discernible on one of these tests. So let's talk about the different language proficiency tests. If you or your organization is interested in language testing, there are quite a few language tests available. There is the ACTFL, ACTFL. There is the DELE, which is for Spanish. There is the DALF, the DALF for French. There is the TOEFL, TOEFL, for those going into English-speaking college. Take this to prove your English level before college. TOEIC, TOEIC, for those going into an English-speaking job position. Take this to prove your high level of fluency in a competitive global market. But each one will test for a very specific set of skills. So you can take an English course for the skills you need for your job, but that might not prepare you to take one of these tests. So you can prepare for your job, you can prepare for one of these tests and learn things that might not be applicable to your work and life. The predicament with each of these is that you might, like I did, get a different result with each one of them. I took the DELE for Spanish and the ACTFL for Spanish, and I got very different scores, although this is not everyone's experience. So if you're going to see if you've improved, take the same test again at the end of your course so that you can compare apples with apples. Which language level reference should you use? Let's talk about this. When people ask me what language level they have, I like to use the CEFR levels, put in place by the Council of Europe in the 1980s and 90s to describe the various levels of speaking a foreign language. It goes from A0, which is no knowledge of the language at all the way up to C2, which is an upper advanced ability to speak a foreign language, which is the level that I have right now would be the C2 level. It's like a native speaker. This reference is used primarily in Europe, but many other countries are now using it as well. In the United States, many organizations use the ACTFL, but no matter which reference you choose, you can see what your level is in any of the scales by checking out the chart online or on our website. As you can see, the ACTFL breaks down some of the CEFR levels into 3 different levels. So you might have low, intermediate, and CEFR, and ACTFL will say low, 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 and low, intermediate. So there's 3 in between. Each CEFR level is a huge difference. That's like 250 hours typically of using the language. ACTFL does a good job of showing you where you lie inside each of the CEFR levels. I'm going to speak more about this later. There are also charts mapping your TOEIC and TOEFL levels compared to the CEFR. So you can find charts that say, if you got this on the ACTFL, you would have gotten this on the CEFR, which means you would have gotten this on the TOEIC, which means you would have gotten this on the TOEFL Very helpful. And we will also put these below as well to links. This is very helpful for what you might get across all tests. And so if you have taken one of these tests, you can tell your boss or university what your test score would have been. How different is each CEFR level? What I talked about a little bit earlier. So the levels in between the A0 and the C2 are very distinct, meaning that two students who are both considered a B1 could have very different abilities in the language, because remember, there's about 250 hours worth of work put into that level. Researchers show various lengths of time to express how long it takes to get from the B1 to the B2 level, but as I've mentioned, most show that it takes up to 260 hours of exposure, learning, and or usage in the language. So someone who has just come into the B1 level could take 260 hours to get out of the B1 level. Researchers also talk a lot about how these hours must be spent in order to consider them hours of language learning. Here at Fluency Corp, we express those hours as active time with the language. But more weight must be given to active participation with the language, where the brain is pushing to express thought and interpret messages that they're hearing. Less weight should be given to passive activities like reading a book, which does not give you ear training, and also it does not give you practice speaking, which is just a totally different activity. For example, if you and a friend are talking for 1 hour with constant back and forth, this is considered 1 hour towards your 260-hour goal to get from B1 to the B2 level. If you read a book for 1 hour, this would only be considered, in our opinion, about 30 minutes toward true language proficiency. You're possibly taking in syntax, grammar, and new vocabulary, but you're not having to produce. There's no practice producing the language and thinking on your feet to respond to someone's questions and expressing your thoughts in stories, which is super hard. It's the hardest thing you can do is tell a story. If you are watching TV for 1 hour without the subtitles, if the subtitles are put on, that's considered reading with some listening. Then 1 hour of TV without subtitles would be counted towards 45 minutes of time with the language. Even though you're not producing the language, your ears are getting trained, and you will likely repeat something you hear on the TV later on in a real conversation. Your brain will store the phrases and categorize what it's hearing while you watch and listen. Since it's a story on the TV, you're learning in context, just like you did when you learned your first language. But you must speak with someone hundreds of hours also, since we know that there are millions of children that understand their parents but cannot respond in the language of the parents because they never had to respond in the target language. These are children that grew up hearing their parents' first language, but when they started school, they stopped responding in the first language because the second language, now the native language, became more dominant. And because the parents also spoke the language being spoken at the school, they could understand their children and did not force them to respond in the original first language of the parents. This resulted in the children being able to understand but not respond. We don't want this to happen to you. Most clients that come to us say they can read the language. Typically, they learned in an academic setting, but they cannot understand it spoken. Or they can understand it spoken if they grew up hearing it from their parents or friends or coworkers, but cannot speak it because they were never forced to speak it. Speaking it is the hardest, and therefore you must spend dedicated hours practicing to speak. How the ACTFL and the CEFR explain language levels. ACTFL tests for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and focuses on real-world usage in a non-rehearsed context. It has 11 levels from novice to distinguished. This article, we'll have a link below, has a description of each level. Language levels are often described in a way that might be hard to imagine. For example, the distinguished level says that someone with this level can use language skillfully with accuracy, efficiency, and effectiveness. But what does that really sound like in a real-world example, in real-world terms? The CEFR describes the C2 level, the highest possible level, as someone being able to understand practically everything heard or read. That's pretty good. But if you've never tested an employee's language level or read an English level test assessment, you might want to read below, we'll have a link, to truly understand how this employee might talk or understand. So if an employee tells you they got an A0 level on a test, they have zero knowledge of this level, of this language. If you get a score from an employee that says A1, they might be able to say, I'm from Japan, I'm 39 years old and married, I have 3 kids, their names are Miko, Mitsu, and Suki, I don't eat meat, I like swimming, I live in Texas now, it's very hot in Texas, I am an engineer. Basic. If you get a report from an employee that says they have an A2 level, which is mostly the level we see of people being transferred from other countries to here, from Japan or Asian countries, very challenging level of English to work in, let me tell you. They might sound like this if they work with you. At restaurants, I usually order red wine with dinner. I work in IT, but I like business also. I take my family on vacation to California every year. We spend 3 days in San Francisco and typically go swimming in the south near San Diego afterwards. We went to Poland last year because it's a new country for us. So that's what they can say. They're probably going to understand about 30% of what you say if you're a native speaker. The B1 level is considered low intermediate. We're getting closer to the level that is typically required to get a job in your second language. Low intermediate might sound like this. I've been living in Texas for the past 3 years. We aren't really used to the heat yet, but it seems that this summer wasn't too bad. I don't have to work weekends. This is great for my family. This summer we decided to spend part of the summer in Michigan. We have some friends there. My family said I cannot work during the trip. It was really peaceful there and we rode horses one of the days. When I returned to the office, there was a lot of work to do, but it was a great time. This person might understand about 45% of what a native speaker is saying, maybe up to 60%. The next level is the B2 level. This is called advanced intermediate. If you get someone that says they have this level, this is the minimum typically accepted to get a job in your second language. This is what a B2 level sounds like. It's been crazy in Dallas recently. We had 2 thunderstorms in 2 weeks and lost electricity for a few days each time. We still went to the office, but there was no air conditioning, so we couldn't work well. At home, this caused us to spend a lot of money for 2 days because we ate at a lot of restaurants. Even though it was annoying, it was also a bit of an adventure for the kids. They loved reading books by candlelight and checking out different plants in the yard during the day. I don't even think they missed the iPhones and iPads. This is professional proficiency. Now, there are 2 other levels that you can check out below, but we wanted to at least show you the ones up to being able to get a job. We hope this helps you understand how your employees might speak and what they might understand at each of these levels. Of course, we wrote this with correct grammar, but realistically, there would be grammar mistakes and, of course, an accent. Nothing wrong with that. Our purpose in this is to show overall ability to express oneself. Whether someone makes a grammar mistake or not does not typically take away from overall understanding. So take into consideration that anyone speaking his or her second language will likely make grammar mistakes and will sometimes pronounce things incorrectly. I pronounce things incorrectly in English sometimes. Our examples here were focused on overall depth of expression. I hope this has helped you, and please look at the links below if you would like to see some of the infographics with everything that I've said.